The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters. Greetings and welcome to the Personal Safety Show. This is Marcus Melnick with Stress2Logic, and I'm very excited because today I have Manya Chylinski on the line. Manya was at the Boston Marathon bombing, which was several years ago, and we're going to talk to her about her experiences and how she now today is a speaker and helps other people who have, I'll call it, and she may correct me, invisible trauma. Manya, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to our listeners.
Oh, I'm pleased to be here, Marcus. Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. Can you tell everyone, what is your origin story before the bombing? What did you do? Talk about your background, education, work, fitness, whatever you'd like to share with the listeners.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked that. Sometimes I forget that I did have a life before the bombing. And I worked at the time as a freelance writer, and I actually continue to do a little bit of that work. I work as an independent consultant working with largely technology and tech adjacent firms, writing long form marketing content. And most of your listeners will not have read anything that I have written, and that's okay. Probably not the main market, because I write things like white papers about data center and technology used in data centers, that sort of thing. And that is what I had been doing for a few years when in 2013. And prior to that, I worked as a product manager and an editor in a textbook publishing company. And before that, I was a research librarian. So I've always kind of been in the field of words and communications and thinking about information and how to communicate it effectively.
I'm guessing you were into fitness as well.
Well, not so much. I mean, I'm into fitness in as much as I need to do that for myself. I attended the marathon because it's just this big party in the city that day. I am not a runner. Tried to be a runner one time and decided it wasn't for me.
Can I share a secret with you?
Sure.
I'm not a runner either.
Oh, good. We need to find each other.
Yeah. So I actually thought when I read the whole thing, I envisioned you as being a runner in the marathon. You were a spectator of the marathon. Is that correct?
Correct. I was a spectator. Yes.
Sweet. So can you talk about your experience with the bomb or with the Boston Marathon and how it evolved into this just horrendous attack on innocent people?
Absolutely. So I live in the city of Boston, and like I mentioned, the marathon is a party. That day is just a big party, and I'm not far from the finish line. So almost every year that I had lived in Boston, I would attend the marathon, at least for a little bit. I would always try to go out for the first runners who were going to cross the finish line, which was often the wheelchair racers, and then the elite runners. And I always wanted to be out there just to celebrate them. And, I certainly not sure I could run 26 yards. So the fact that they're running 26 miles is pretty impressive. And just like to be part of it. In 2013, a friend got us tickets for the bleacher seats, which are overlooking the finish line, and good for 2:00 on that day. So in the morning, I did what I normally did, which is basically watch on the TV until I knew that the runners were close to finishing, and then run outside and stand on the street and watch them come by and cheer them on. And that meant that I was never close to the fence to watch, because there were 5-10 people thick. So I would sort of just be able to peek through the crowd to see them. I've never been one who wants to stand for hours waiting for something to come by just to save a spot. That morning I did it. I watched on the TV until the first runners were approaching. Then I ran out to cheer them on, and then met up with my friends a little bit later, and we walked over and got ourselves situated in the bleachers at just about 2:00. And that was amazing. I think it was the second time I had been in the bleachers in all of the time I've been in Boston. And it was just amazing. And I was excited because that meant I could sit and watch all these people who have just run 26 miles, who have exerted themselves extraordinarily. And I wanted to sit to watch them go past. But it turns out, as soon as the first few people in the bleachers stand up to watch, everybody has to stand up. So I wasn't getting the rest that I was hoping for. So that's where I was. I was standing there cheering on the runners at 2:49 when a bomb went off directly across the street from me. And it was an understatement to say that it was shocking. I froze in place and I just had tunnel vision. I was just staring directly across the street at the site where the bomb went off. I watched the spectators on that side running away, watched the cloud of smoke getting bigger and rising up against the building across from me. And I didn't really have any conscious thought, but in as much as I had any idea what was happening, I did think to myself, they just ruined the Boston Marathon. And as I was trying to figure out what is happening and what has happened to the people across the street, the second bomb went off. And I turned and looked down the street, and saw that cloud of smoke rising and getting bigger, and realized, okay, this is a bomb, or these are bombs, and we have to get out of here. And that's when I looked to my friends and said, we have to get out of here. And we evacuated. And, I thought missing out, being on the side of the street that I was on and not having any physical injuries, I thought, okay, that was an awful thing that I witnessed, but I'm okay. And I didn't realize until later that, being grateful for not having physical injuries, but it doesn't mean that I was okay.
The last thing I want to do is re-traumatize anyone on the show. So if I venture into an area that you are not comfortable talking about, you let me know. And
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
I should have said that at the beginning, but I truly, truly, strongly feel that way. Could you feel the blast from where you were?
The answer is probably yes, but I don't have any
recollection
of that. I don't have any feelings in my body that I felt that, okay. But I do know the bleachers where I was standing were in front of the Boston Public Library and in front of the doors to the library. And at some point I saw a video of the doors and windows that were behind me and how they bowed in towards the library with the blast wave. So I know that there was a blast wave that went through me to get to the doors of the library. I just don't have a physical recollection of that.
So this is just fascinating to me, the fact that you're a survivor, and I'm very, very honored that you would take the time to talk to me and my listeners. But what you just described is exactly what I talk about in my keynote speaking. Memory lapses, freezing behaviors, coming to, snapping to, and taking action, which is what you did. How long would you say it took you beyond the initial shock of just this event to snap to it, come to your senses and say, let's get out of here?
Well, it was just a few seconds. So it Fantastic. Was the first bomb, and then I believe the second bomb was 12 seconds later.
Okay.
And then it was after the second bomb that I thought, well, I don't really want to be here anymore. Let's get out of here.
I appreciate it's real subtle humor there, understatement. And I appreciate that. And I totally get it. And just as someone who studies this, I would say you got out of there pretty quick. 12 to 15 seconds is excellent for someone who, has not been trained in bomb response. And I'm guessing you haven't been trained in bomb response. Is that correct?
No,
okay.
I have not. And I did know it was a bomb. My thought was, that's a bomb that just went off. And I don't know how I knew that. Other people that I know didn't think it was a bomb. One person thought it was a water cannon that had gone off, in fun and celebration. Somebody else thought that maybe a manhole cover had exploded. Again, in as much as I had any conscious thought, it was, oh, that's a bomb. But no idea why that was where my mind went.
I would venture to guess it would be instinct. Can you describe what is Boston Strong, that whole movement?
That I laugh because it's something that is very problematic for me. So not long after the bombing, I believe it was some college students, but I could be wrong here, came up with the meme Boston Strong. And we certainly have seen it plenty of times in the last 11 years. Las Vegas Strong, other strong, people kind of using it as a rallying cry when something difficult happens. And I honestly don't know how it was used before Boston, but it started as a hashtag on social media. And then I think early on people were selling shirts that said Boston Strong. And I think early on the proceeds were going to survivors. And it was problematic for me. And I know for some other survivors as well, I wasn't feeling strong. I wasn't feeling like I thought people were feeling when they used the phrase Boston Strong. I thought that meant that people were feeling, we've got this, I'm recovering, I feel good, I'm channeling my energy into helping survivors, and I'm great, and you should be too. That's how I took it. And I didn't feel strong, and I didn't feel okay. And I was having a lot of symptoms of post-traumatic stress. And what I was seeing in the media and through the official response was all focused on the physical injuries, the bereaved families, and not much, if anything, on people like me with the mental health and emotional wounds and walking away feeling traumatized. And so to me, the meme Boston Strong just amplified that I was invisible and that people like me were invisible. I recognize that that was not the intention of the folks who first came up with it, the people who first used it as a hashtag. And I don't think it was the intention of anybody who kind of latched onto this as a rallying cry for support. It is how it came across to me, and I know to other survivors as well. To some other survivors, certainly not everyone.
So as you're talking about this, and I did not think about this ahead of time, so this is kind of off script a little bit. I live very close to the city of Highland Park, Illinois, which is, they had the July 4th mass shooting there a couple of years ago. Mm-hmm. So I actually have a Highland Park Strong shirt, and so does my wife. I bought them from my wife and me, and we have relatives and friends that live there. And one of the things, as I'm listening to you talk about this, I'm thinking those slogans and shirts were really for people who weren't involved. Would you agree or disagree?
I think for the most part, yes. And I recognize it as a way to express solidarity and shock and pain and all of the things that a community feels. But I do think it's largely for people who weren't directly involved.
Very good. Thank you. So you use the words, I felt invisible. Can you describe what an invisible victim is to educate everybody who's listening?
That is a term that I started using pretty quickly after the bombing. And I don't believe I could claim to be the person who coined the term, but it was something that came to my mind because it was quite simple. I just felt invisible. I spent a lot of time looking for support and looking for information and looking for what I realize now is validation of my experience in the news media and coming from the city or the state and the things that they were saying at news conferences. And I was looking for people to say, it is normal to be feeling the way that you're feeling. This incredible distress after this awful event just happened in front of you. And I wasn't hearing that. And I wasn't seeing things that were validating my experience. I did manage to find some services. The Massachusetts Office for Victim Assistance provided some free counseling and many other services for survivors of all types. Was not required that you had a physical injury to be involved with their services. And through that, I found a counseling group, and it was for anyone who was near the finish line. You didn't have to say anything other than, I just need help. And it was a lot of people like myself who did not have physical injuries, but we did have a few folks who had some of the less catastrophic physical injuries, because this is the summertime afterwards, and many, many folks who had the catastrophic physical injuries were still in hospital and rehab centers at this point. One of those folks said that they had just recently attended a support group for survivors that Boston mayor had attended. And many of us in our group got kind of upset about that. Not that we wanted the mayor not that we necessarily needed to talk to the mayor or have him come to our group, but what it showed was that the survivors with physical injuries were getting a different level of support and a different level of attention. And just wasn't even on the radar screen of the city that we existed. And so that just reinforced to me that we were invisible, that because we didn't have physical wounds, because you couldn't see the effect of the bomb on our bodies, we didn't count. We weren't visible. And that's when I think I started saying, like, we're just invisible. We're invisible victims. And there you have it.
Very good. So you mentioned that you found some counseling groups and went through and I'm going to slaughter this, sorry, the Massachusetts Organization for Victims. You're going to say it better than I am because you lived it. I didn't live it. What else did you do to heal from this Sentinel event in your life, if anything?
I've done a lot in the last 11 years. And early on, I want to say, looking back at that time in my life, it was so difficult for me to know what was happening to me and to be making what I'm going to describe as conscious choices about what to do for myself, because I'd never gone through anything like this. Nobody that I knew had ever gone through anything like this. So there wasn't a playbook of, here are the steps you take, and these are the things to think about. And so I just did almost anything and everything that presented itself to me that I thought might be helpful. So I had found out about MOVA, the Massachusetts Office for Victim Assistance, because I had gone to an event where they were talking about supporting survivors. And they specifically said, we don't think we're going to be doing anything for the people with the mental health wounds. And I left because I thought, well, then I don't need to be here if you're not going to be caring about what happened to me. And I met a Red Cross volunteer, and they had a packet of information that MOBA had put together. And that had all of these services like counseling. So I went to individual counseling and I went to group counseling. And they talked about an organization that was doing, I believe it was through them, trauma sensitive yoga. So I signed up for that. And early on, it was all I could do to just look at the resources on the page and do what they said. And I did actually call my own doctor's office a week after the bombing and ask to see someone in their behavioral health department, because I'd been to therapy in the past and I knew that could be a way to get support. And early on, if somebody said we're doing this for survivors and you are included, I would go and I would do whatever the thing was that they did. And then things settled down and I started to have a little more agency back. And my journey has largely been therapy and or counseling, trauma counseling in particular, yoga and mindfulness and meditation. And I took a mindfulness-based stress reduction course. That has been, so over the years, as I've needed help at different times, I've tapped into those different tools to help me.
Very good. So we're talking about professional help. And as people, sometimes we will encounter someone, a family member, a friend, person in the community, who has gone through a trauma. And traumas are all over the scale. Your trauma is, I would say, on the larger part of the scale. Stubbing someone's toe, and I'm being facetious, is on the smaller side. But we all have trials and tribulations in life, some of which are severe, like you went through. What's the best way that we can, as friends, as family members, support others who are going through trauma, rough times, major trauma, mini trauma, big T, little t? How would you recommend that we be able to support someone as a non-professional?
So for friends and family, one of the best things you can do is listen without judgments. And I know that can be very difficult, especially when someone's going through a particularly large or difficult trauma, because we want to help our friends and family. We don't want them to be in pain. And it can be very difficult to sit maybe even physically next to someone and have them talk about their pain, because we will also feel that pain. But I think listening without judgment, I think it's also important to let the person who's going through the trauma lead the way. If they want to talk, you listen. If they don't want to talk, that's fine. You don't force them to listen. And there's a caveat, though, to them leading the way. So I will tell you, I had no idea what I needed. I did a few things. I got myself to therapy. All of those things were very helpful, but I didn't know what I needed. And if anybody asked me, what can I do to help? I never knew an answer. And if you offered something specific, how about I bring dinner over tonight for you? So that's easy. Yes or no? I have dinner. I don't need it. Yes, I'd love that. Great. So I think you want to let the person lead the way, but it's also important to recognize they may not know what they need. So make an offer, specific offer. Can I pick the kids up from school for you today? They're going to say yes or no, but that's easier because they don't then have to think about what do I need, because they might not know what they need. Now, if you are seeing your person struggle and you're thinking, gosh, it would be really great if you saw a counselor or if you talked to our minister. I think those things could be helpful for you. And you want to share that with the person. Be very gentle about that. I had this idea. You don't have to do it. I just wonder, would that be helpful for you? Would it be helpful to maybe try to find a therapist? Would it be helpful to talk to your rabbi? Maybe they might be able to offer some guidance. So I think it's listening, letting them lead, and being gentle when you're offering ideas.
Manya, I'm going to ask you to get out of my head. So, it's so funny because I've said almost the exact same thing you did. Mm-hmm. In that, I'm in business, so I hear competitors say, if you need anything, call me. And nobody knows what they need, which is what you just described. I tell people, hey, if you need an interpretation of the law, if you need a speaker, if you need to bounce something off me for stress management, these are the areas that I can help you in. And it's exactly the same concept. So for me, it's extremely refreshing to hear you say that. And typically when we have people, and the traumas that I've encountered, for the most part, at least on a personal level, not a professional level, because I used to work in public safety, involved deaths of family members. And we always would either have them over to our house for dinner, send them dinner, take them out to eat, something like that. We would do exactly that. And one of the things that I've said, and I'm going to ask you if this is appropriate, I'm available if you ever want to talk about it. I'm not going to ask you, but I'm your resource. Would that be okay to say?
I think so. That would have been okay to say to me. I will tell you, though, that I don't know if I would have done anything about that if you merely said it to me one time. Perhaps you said those words and I heard them. I might not think, I'm feeling stressed, I'm going to call Marcus. But if then I saw you on the street or we were talking on the phone and you said, how are you doing? Then those two things together, I might think, oh yes, he is open to hearing the difficulties that I'm going through.
The views expressed are not those of local community broadcasting, WYML LP, or its management, volunteers, or underwriters.